management at my firm thought I was crazy because I was
Right.
leaving, this tremendous salary to go do government work. But to me, like that's what I wanted. I don't know if this is for me anymore. And so, in maybe another panicked decision, I decided to open up a coffee roasting company.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Success in South Florida podcast. I'm your host, Adam Rossen, and on today's episode, I'm so excited to have Andres Muñoz here. Andres, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I know we've been talking about this for a little bit, so I'm finally glad we got to do this, in live and in studio in the Fort Lauderdale office. So Andres, you're an attorney. You have a really cool story to tell. You just moved down here about 3 years ago.
Right.
Okay. So let's, and I'm the guy that hates like the formal introductions on these shows. So let's just tell everybody in our audience really who you are, and why should we listen to you and why are you here on this podcast?
Sure, I appreciate that. I'm also not the guy that is very self-promoting, but I'm a business litigator. Excuse me. I'm practicing for almost 20 years now, and I help business owners navigate business disputes. And so, my career started in 2005. I've taken a bunch of twists and turns in different directions, and now I'm in South Florida. I'm with the law firm of Romano Law. They're based out in Manhattan, but I came down here 3 years ago. The plan was to build out the South Florida practice, and it's been really interesting and very exciting.
Cool. That's great. So, you graduated law school, you said in '05. I graduated in '06, or about the same age. And so talk to me about, kind of just childhood, teenage years. Where'd you grow up and what really steered you into making a career out of the law?
Sure. So I have to say, I never thought I was going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
um, I always thought I'd be a scientist. What kid doesn't want to be an astronaut?
Yeah.
And I was steered in that direction because I loved just working with my hands, tools, taking toys apart, making new toys. And so my father was always like, you're going to be an engineer. And so in high school, when I was applying to colleges, that's all I was looking at was technical schools. And I ended up at Boston University, where I got a degree in mechanical engineering.
Okay. And,
Um,
and BU is a great school. Did you have fun in Boston?
Boston is the ultimate college town. I
Yeah.
thought I had such a great experience there. I made some great connections. I thought the school was great. Um, but at the end of it, as I'm one of those New Yorkers that are like, die hard New York. This is the only city for me. To me, Boston was a big town. I thought I had to get back to New York City. But while I was there, it was great. The town itself is beautiful. It was undergoing a lot of developments, so I had a great time.
Yeah. I'm a native South Floridian. All my family's from New York, but if I had to choose, it'd be Boston all the way. It's big, but it's small. It's, New York, I think, is just too big for me. But my brother went to dental school at BU. I loved going to visit him. It was just, I don't know. Boston's a great place. It's one of
Oh,
my happy
for
places.
sure.
So,
Anytime I can visit, I'll go up there. I
right.
still have some good friends up there.
But yeah, and look, as the New York Boston rivalry will never go away. So I understand that for you as a New Yorker. See, I'm the South Floridian, so I'm already conditioned to hate New York,
Gotcha,
especially
gotcha.
sports. I mean, we hate Boston sports too, but if I had to choose, I guess I would go with Boston over New York.
Okay.
Maybe that's just me.
Well, for the record, I'm a New York a New York Mets fan,
Okay.
and so the Sox Yankees rivalry was not really applicable for me.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Well, what about the Marlins Mets? Or nobody cares.
Right,
Nobody
right,
cares
right.
about that. Right. Okay. So then you go back to New York. And well, how did you actually get in? What was your thought process? So mechanical engineering degree, that's a little rare for law school. I was criminology and
Sure.
psychology, more of the liberal arts. The great thing about law school is you can have any undergrad degree,
Right.
but how did you go from mechanical engineering to law?
So it wasn't until the summer between my junior and senior year, I got a great internship working for a prestigious engineering company. Um, But after the 3 months, I decided that engineering wasn't for me. And it was very naive of me. Um, but the experience, like I was working with these design engineers and it was so solitary. There was no teamwork. It was very like antisocial. I say it's naive because not all engineering jobs are like that.
Right.
In fact, most of them are collaborative. You work as a team to get to an end result. But I had sort of a weird experience, and I thought, "Oh, I can't do engineering. Like this is not for me." And so at the time, my sister, who was 4 years older than me, was applying to law schools because she always knew that she wanted to be a lawyer. And so, in like a moment of panic, I sent out a few applications, only to New York-based schools, um, and I got accepted. I wasn't really thinking the business school route, and so I was like, let me try this. I don't want to do engineering, and I ended up at New York Law School. Um, like I said, as sort of like a last minute decision, but it ended up working out.
Right. Right. That's so interesting. Now, was it something about growing up, because some people thrive in team atmospheres, some people don't. I was always a team sports guy. I was
Sure.
a basketball player, pretty good. I've been a high school basketball coach, high school seasons, about 10 seasons. I've coached on and off in different programs for the last 20 years.
Hmm.
And so for me, although I love playing tennis, for me the tennis, the swimming, the maybe like a gymnastics, the real individual stuff. And yes, you can play doubles and you can be part of a swim team and stuff, but it's really individual when it's all said and done. Golf,
Right.
that was just never me. It was baseball, basketball, soccer. I didn't really, you know, flag football,
Sure.
things like that where you're around the team. I built the firm to be a big team because when it was just me, it was very lonely as well.
Yep.
So what was there anything in your just kind of childhood, teenage years that you morphed into that, or you had that team experience as well, or
I,
not?
I I think so. Starting in high school, also part of team sports. Soccer, baseball was big. Um, Even just, after school, I wasn't about the individual, hobbies. It was hanging out with friends, being very social. So that social aspect is important for me. Um, and again, I just had that weird experience at that internship. And it was like the complete opposite of that because even in academically, like my projects were always team based. You collaborate as a team to get to an end result. Um, and so I think that's what sort of turned me off of it. And I sort of saw law as also team based, working, to solve a problem for a client.
Right. And did you have any experience in the law prior to going to law school? Did you have any friends, family? Did you ever intern in a law firm?
Not at all. Not at all. The closest I had was a mock trial in, I think it was ninth grade. Um, that was a little bit eye opening for me. I liked the theater aspect of trial. But other than that, it was nothing. I really had no idea what I was getting myself
Right.
into.
Okay. Okay. So you go, and it's funny because when I went to law school, I wanted it to be all about trials. And my first year, it was a rude awakening because I learned that it had nothing to do with trials. It was all reading and writing,
Yeah.
not a lot. I mean, some speaking Socratic method in class, but I was like, get me in court. I want to do this. And
Yep.
they're like, no, you'll be lucky if you get that by your 3L year.
Right.
So it was a little different for me, in that way, because I really wanted the litigation aspect. But okay, so you go to New York Law. Did you like it? Did you have a good time there? And how did you go to starting off in prosecution instead of maybe patent law, IP,
Yeah.
trademarks, which a lot of engineers who go to law school are naturally drawn to?
Sure. So I had a great time at New York Law School. From day one, made some really great connections. Um, and you know, I should say part of the decision to go to law school was motivated by a patent litigator that I had met just at the very end of college. Um, and so I was thinking, I can parlay my technical experience into a patent, based practice. And I actually did do that. So right out of law school, I ended up working for a large boutique firm in Manhattan doing patent litigation. Um, and kind of like you, like from that very first semester, Yes, it was a lot of reading and writing, but it was the trial advocacy part that I liked. So I
Right.
ended up doing a lot of clinics, judicial externships, and ended up at this firm where I was at for about 4 years doing patent litigation.
Right. And I thought everybody loved that type of law, and I realized in law school most people actually hate that type of law. Okay, so you're doing the patent litigation, and how did you steer to being a prosecutor?
So at my first firm, we were doing great work. We represented large pharmaceutical companies in patent disputes. Um, these cases were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Um, these blockbuster drugs that generics are trying to come onto the market and invalidate the patent. And so we had large teams, and the clients obviously were very heavily invested in these cases. And so as a young associate, I was definitely doing a lot of legal research, a lot of document review. These cases were, the documents at issue were like in the millions of pages. So you needed someone to go through that.
Right.
Within that first year, I was like, this is great work, but I want to do more, right? I want to do like that trial component.
Maybe even let you take a deposition at one time or
Well,
two.
I mean, that was the hope at that
Right,
point,
yeah.
but it became pretty clear to me that even just taking a deposition was like 7 or 8 years like down the road.
Yeah, it's funny because when I started, I went straight to the Broward State Attorney's Office when I
Sure.
graduated from Miami Law. And after my first year, I'm talking to my friends that are in big law down in Brickell, all the fancy ones. They're making 3-4 times what I'm
Right.
making. And I said, well, I've had 20 trials. How many have you had? 0. Oh, but in 2 years, I'm a third chair one. I
Right.
said, well, I've taken depositions. I've done motions to suppress. I'm like, and they go, oh, I haven't taken a deposition.
No, yeah.
So I said, I'm like, so you're a very highly paid law clerk. Congratulations. Like,
Right.
my bank account's jealous of yours right now, but I'm a real lawyer and I'm in the trenches, and they just
Yeah.
threw me in and I had to figure it out. So
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky if I could like contribute a paragraph to a. Brief,
right.
Other than that, it did really feel like clerical work. And so, you know, after 3-4 years, I that urge to do more was like overwhelming. And so I started applying to prosecutors' offices. Um, and I ended up getting an offer from the Queens County District Attorney's Office in New York City. And to me, that was a no-brainer. I mean, I would be doing trial work, within like weeks of
Yep.
getting there. And so I gave notice, and I think, management at my firm thought I was crazy because I was
Right.
leaving, this tremendous salary to go do government work. But to me, like that's what I wanted.
Right. And so when you get there, was it everything that you thought it would be?
Not exactly.
No.
So I joined the Queens County DA's office in 2009. And if you remember, that's basically when the economy collapsed.
Right.
So I was lucky enough to get a job. And historically, the office had hired 2 classes, one in the fall, one in the spring. You know, each class
Around bar results.
around
Yeah.
bar results, right? And each class was about, between 15 to 20 people. So there was a lot of movement up because in New York City, you start in misdemeanor court. So
Right.
you're prosecuting shoplifting cases, misdemeanor drug possession, stuff like that. And typically it was you do that for 6 to 12 months and then you move on to felonies and bigger and better things and doing, felony jury trials. Unfortunately, in 2009, since there was not a lot of classes coming in behind me, I was stuck prosecuting misdemeanors for much longer than expected.
And you're not a 25-year-old brand new law school graduate, right?
Right.
You're more of an adult at this time. You've
I-
been a lawyer for
Yeah.
4 years.
I'm more of an adult, and even though I wasn't that old at that time, most of the classes were fresh law student graduates, and so I was like the old man to them.
Right.
And so, but you, as I'm sure like at a job like that, you learn by being thrown into the fire. And so, when you ask like, is it everything I expected? I did not expect to be prosecuting misdemeanors for that long, but my first week there, I did a suppression hearing, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
I still remember it vividly because it was so traumatic for me. I feel like I did so bad.
Some of those defense attorneys are just, feasting on fresh meat. Right.
And that judge in particular.
Right. And it's not like you're 2 months out of law school or just 2 months out of the bar. You've been a lawyer. So in a way, was it humbling for you to kind of maybe get your butt kicked a little bit when you had been an associate at a fancy big law, firm handling complex things to
Yeah.
kind of go back into the trenches?
Totally. like using that hearing as an example, it was I I felt so bad about it because in my head I'm like, I can't lead the witness. This is my witness. I have to ask open-ended questions, otherwise I draw an objection. It was like, so I did not feel good about it. But going into it, I was like, oh, I got this.
Right.
I've been practicing for 4 years at this firm, and yes, I could blue book, cite any legal brief, but with my eyes, closed. But when it came to like that kind of work, it was very new to me.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So, how long were you at the prosecutor's office? What kind of cases did you get to, and ultimately, why did you decide to leave?
So I was there for a total of 5 years. Like I said, I was prosecuting misdemeanor cases for about a year and a half. After that, I was lucky to rotate into a special program called the writing program. Essentially, for a year, it was a rotation where 1 week you're on call for 24 hours, and you're on call for any NYPD investigatory unit. So if they need a subpoena, if they have to put together a lineup, if they need any sort of legal process that a prosecutor can facilitate, search warrants, I would get a call. And so I would show up to precincts all over Queens County to help them with that stuff, especially lineups, take pictures.
That seems exciting.
It was super
Yeah.
exciting. They gave me a police car
For
that
very
week.
nice.
And so I'm this,
Were you messing with the lights and
Oh,
trying to get
totally.
around traffic?
yeah, young lawyer, like shooting through Queens County on the highway with lights and sirens. No idea what I was doing. That's not true. I had some idea. But it was great. And I learned a lot about, investigating cases and mistakes not to make so that you can prosecute a case down the road. So I did that for about a year. And then after that, I rotated into a felony trial bureau. Now, my particular trial bureau handled all gun cases in Queens County. And at the time, the policy was, even for a first arrest, if you're caught with a gun, the minimum offer is 3 years, which
Right.
no one is taking. And so those cases typically would go to trial.
And New York's traditionally been very tough on guns. Very
Correct.
tough. I still remember the Plaxico Burris case.
Absolutely.
When he had the Florida permit. I think his Florida permit expired,
Yeah.
but he tried to do everything the right way in Florida. It just so happens there's no reciprocity. His permit expired, and he's up in New York, and whoopsies.
And it's Plaxico
Shoot.
Burris, and they don't
Right.
care.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, in a way, I would assume that they would maybe want to make an example
Right.
out of him. And not only did he shoot himself in the leg, but
Right.
he did it in New York by accident.
Yeah.
Whoops, wrong place. So
On that note, we have two airports in Queens County, LaGuardia and JFK. And so we would get a lot of cases of, regular average Joe civilians coming in from Florida, for example, or Alabama, where it's open carry. And they call the airline and they say, hey, I'm traveling to New York. Can I bring my firearm? And they say, sure, just put it in a lockbox,
Right.
keep the ammunition separate, and declare it. And they would do that. And it was fine on the way out. But on the way back home,
problems.
there was problems. The airlines will tell you one thing, but the law is different up there. And so these people would check in to fly home after a vacation, and then they find themselves in central booking getting processed
Oh, wow. That's
for
terrible.
felony possession. And so in those cases, we made a lot of exceptions to that policy. And most of them were resolved with non-criminal pleas. But it was, imagine spending 24 hours and getting arraigned on a felony, and
Right. It makes it online. It's it's searchable. It's public record. It's terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so in that trial bureau, prosecute a lot of gun cases. At that point, now we're talking about, felony robberies with firearms, drugs, fraud cases. And we were really busy. As my boss would put it, we were like the sanitation department of the prosecutor's office, because whatever the specialized bureaus didn't get would come to us. And so at that point,
and they took the biggest cases, the cases with the best detectives,
yeah.
anything that maybe had any kind of suppression issue. I'm sure they just kicked to you guys. And,
Exactly.
let them deal with it.
any well-investigated case was not coming to
Right.
us.
Right.
For us, it was like, made this arrest, this guy had eight guns in the car, and there's all sorts of search and seizure issues, and we have to figure it out. But those are the cases where you learn a lot.
Right.
very
Yes.
quickly.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I was there for about 2.5 years, and my caseload was super busy. I mean, I was working big firm hours for a third of the pay,
Right.
and it was just not sustainable anymore for me. And so, like I said, one of my goals was to go from private practice, get practical courtroom experience, trial experience, and then potentially come back. And that's essentially what ended up happening. I couldn't afford to work there anymore.
Right. At that time, are you single? Are you married? Do you have kids?
At that time, I was single.
Okay.
But it's funny you mention that because when I started at the DA's office in 2009, my class was, I believe, 12 people. And my now wife was part of that class.
Oh, okay.
And so we were friendly throughout our journey through the DA's office. At one point, we were office mates.
Okay.
But we didn't start
Any good
dating.
stories? Or no?
Not really.
No.
We didn't start dating until shortly
Okay.
after I left. But I tell people it was, I saw like the true her. We were, like I said, we shared an office. We prep witnesses together. We'd get right in the morning, and it was a pretty cool experience.
Did you guys have any trials together?
We did not have trials
Oh,
together.
that would have been fun.
That would have been fun, maybe. We have different work styles,
Right.
but I can say that I did cover a trial for her once. It was a case that was on for trial. The trial had to start because there was speedy trial issues, and she told me, defense counsel's not going to be ready. Don't worry about it. Well, what ended up happening? Case gets called and it gets set for trial. Like the next day, we're picking a jury, and
Hey, fun. That's what you wanted. That real life experience, right? Thrown
totally.
into the fire.
Talk about fire. That case had several issues to it. We had a surprise witness. I'll throw that in the learning experience bin, and it had the right outcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the right?
An
Looking back.
acquittal in about 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
the defense attorney knew what he or she was doing, and
Defense attorney was very good
okay,
in that case. Yeah.
good. It happens.
It happens. As I'm sure you know, part of the true teachers, for the most part, in a prosecutor's office, are the well-experienced, seasoned defense attorneys that, teach you lessons the hard
Right.
way.
Oh yeah. I got my butt kicked a bunch when I was a young prosecutor. I mean, I won a lot of cases too, but I learned way more from getting my butt kicked
Yep.
than I did from the wins. And look, I think it's great when you have somebody who's a former prosecutor, and says, look, the right result happened, and it was I lost. But
Right.
that was the right result based on everything, because
Right.
it is truly the prosecutor's job. It's not just about win at all costs. And luckily, my wife is a very reasonable, fair prosecutor as well. She's still a prosecutor in Palm Beach, and that's kind of the approach she takes. Obviously, for her very serious cases,
Yeah.
she's very passionate about it. But our system is founded upon the principles that the defendant gets the benefit of the doubt, and the prosecutors and the police have to prove it. And a lot of her cases too, sometimes the ones that have the great police work,
Right.
they don't go to trial. The
Right.
ones where the police rush through it, make a mistake, cut corners, those are the ones that usually have issues and
Absolutely.
go to trial, or serious felonies get reduced to misdemeanors, and it is what it is. And
Absolutely.
it's part of the process.
And I give a lot of credit to my bosses because from day one, they underscored that our obligation is to do justice. Right. We never kept conviction rates. That was never a concern. It was always do the right thing. And I was very lucky to work for bosses that gave us a lot of responsibility, would back up our decisions. And some of my proudest moments in that office are not the convictions that I got, but are the dismissals that I made on certain cases, because that was the right result.
Right. Well, just like you're saying, with the people from Florida and Alabama and the Southeast that come to New York, there's no criminal intent.
Right.
And at the end of the day, gun possession is it's not a 10 commandment crime, right?
Correct.
It's mala prohibitum. It's okay. It's it's fiction. It's fake. It's just, we made these laws
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And it just so happens the laws in the South are different than the laws in New York. So, but it doesn't mean that they're bad people at all, and there's no criminal intent. So the fact that they allowed you to do that over worrying about politics and
Hmm.
conviction rates is so important. And that's one of the reasons I left the Broward State Attorney's Office almost 20 years ago, is because I wasn't able to do those things. I didn't have the autonomy and freedom that I wanted to do the right thing. And sometimes I wanted to I believe the right thing was for the defendant. And I didn't like that.
Hmm.
And ultimately, one of maybe the 3 to 5 reasons why I chose to start my own law firm at 26 years old in 2008. Also,
Wow.
just a few months before the economic collapse. Great times. But when when you're too young and dumb to fail, you find a way.
Sure.
But that was so important to me, and that was just a major frustration point for me, and one of the reasons why I left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to colleagues that have worked for other offices, and it's a little bit different, right? There's more expectation on, what the convictions are, and I wouldn't be able to tolerate that,
Right.
because it's just morally for me,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, so you leave there. Now, where do you go after that?
So I leave the DA's office, and I go to a large nationwide firm, Big Law in Manhattan. Um, Now, having significant amounts of practical courtroom experience under my belt, and I start working as essentially a commercial intellectual property litigator. I was lucky, though, that this particular office, the managing partners were former federal prosecutors.
Okay, so they
And
actually valued your
yes,
litigation, your criminal law experience, because a lot of big law
exactly.
could not care less.
Totally. And I'll say, when I was looking for firms to go back to, I spoke with a couple of recruiters in a couple of firms, and their perspective was, but you've been in the government for five
Right,
years.
you just
Like,
wasted 5 years
yeah,
of your
you're out of the
career.
game. Like, that, you're done. But I was mind blown by that. But no, these managing partners, like, they appreciated that. And so I joined that firm. It was a law firm of Baker Hostetler, who at the time, and still is, represents the trustee in the Madoff liquidation.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they had a lot of work. And so a good chunk of my practice was involved in those cases. And then the other part of my practice was commercial disputes, breach of contract, intellectual property disputes, things like that.
As a Mets fan, that probably hit home, the Madoff case.
Oh, the
And
Wilpons,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I did not work on that side of things.
Okay.
I sort of tried to ignore that, but yeah, that was brutal.
Yeah. Okay. So you're there for a while, and fast forward a little bit. How do you start working? Talk to me about Romano Law and your decision to move to Florida. And I believe there's a kind of another little side project detour with the coffee company. So I want to
Absolutely.
tell us all about that too.
There's definitely more twists and turns. So Baker Hostetler was a great firm. Again, I made some great connections. There's some very smart people that work there. People I still talk to. I still have group chats with them. Um, and we were doing great work, but I came to the realization that big law, um, and this was with, like, the next step on the radar, partnership. As I was told, I'm the plane, the landing runway is in sight. I just have to bill, a certain number of more hours the next year, and they'll, it's part of the process. And sort of like envisioning my future, I was like, well, if I'm successful in getting to that next step, I'd be a partner at this big firm, which is great, good money. Um, but I would effectively, be a service partner. Like, I didn't have at that time, this tremendous network with a large book of business. And so, I'll be frank, if you're a partner at a big law firm without your own book, you have very little clout within the firm.
Right.
And so I was very hesitant. A couple of other things happened. I had my first son in 2018.
Okay.
I was now, settled down,
Right.
married. Um, and I would leave the house at 8 in the morning, come back 9, 10 at night, very long hours. And at that rate, I was like, I'm never going to see my son.
Right.
I don't know if this is for me anymore. And so in maybe another panicked decision, I decided to open up a coffee roasting company.
Right. Well, and I think the lessons too with that is that just more, the answer is not always more money, more work,
Right.
right? Because again, the first 5 years of your son's life, you're not going to be around, and those are the formative years. Those are very important.
Sure.
So, okay. So, and how do you go from big law to coffee? I mean,
Great question. So I had been messing around with coffee roasting. I had a little roaster. I had put it in my in-laws' garage in Queens, and I had met a couple of people in the industry. And for me, I guess I thought at this moment I need the farthest thing from law.
okay.
I need to be a little bit more creative, maybe work with my hands. I'm not really sure, but
Well, you were the guy that was the tinkerer, the builder,
sure, exactly.
which I never had those skills. So to me, that was always, I'm like looking at it like, my brother and dad are really good with that stuff. And I looked at it, I was like, I have no interest in this at all. So, okay, so you have that, right? So that's
Sure.
very important.
The Success in South Florida podcast is brought to you by the team at Rossen Law Firm. If you need DUI or criminal defense representation, call the Rossen Law Firm at 754-206-6200 or check the description of today's episode for more contact information. The Rossen Law Firm, helping good people when bad things happen so they can achieve their best futures.
So at the time, I was messing around with coffee roasting. I had bought a little coffee roaster. I had set it up in my in-laws' garage. I had met a couple of people in the industry. It seemed just like a very interesting area that was totally brand new for me and the farthest thing away from law, which is, I think, what I needed at the moment.
And you were done with law at this time, like not like maybe not done forever, but were you not actively practicing law? Or were you still kind of doing?
So when I made the transition into the coffee world, I was wise enough to stay within the practice on like a very limited part-time basis, which was something that one of my bosses had mentioned that I should do, and probably the more prudent side of me also told me to like.
So you hedged your bets.
Yes, exactly. And so I quit the firm. I remember having a conversation with my managing partner. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of my mouth.
Right.
I am leaving here to start a coffee roasting company. And he thought I was, I'm sure crazy. But by that point, I had already done like a coffee roasting, not apprenticeship, but it was like, some form of training. I wasn't like going in cold, and I had met this guy who had a facility in Queens, and he would rent out his big coffee roaster. It was like a cooperative.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like a soft entry into the industry. And then I just started, trying to market, my product and picking up clients. And in a funny twist of fate, one of my clients ended up being the distributor that distributed coffee to my old law firm.
Okay. Fine.
And it was funny how I got that, because I had lobbied some of my friends who just were like, they hated the coffee at the firm. They had lobbied for me to like sort of, get my product in there.
Okay. They're like, we got to bring him and his new product back into the firm.
Yeah, exactly. And so, now I traded in my business casual attire and my commute into Manhattan for a much different lifestyle. And I found myself not only roasting coffee, but doing coffee tastings, going to like coffee networking events. It was a whole different world, which was great until COVID hit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, at that point, I had picked up a bunch of clients, sales were increasing. But with COVID in New York City, everything got shut down. Most of my clients didn't survive. They just went out of business. And so I was at another crossroads. And like I said, I had the wherewithal to stay, within the practice of law to some extent. What I was doing was contract work for solos or for small firms, helping them with their litigation matters. There was one solo practitioner I think I helped him with like 5 summary judgment motions in the span of a year, which was more writing experience than I had gotten at my old firm,
Right.
Probably the entire time that I was there. And so I was also able to develop legally in that sense. And then, once COVID hit, things slowed down on the coffee end. And that's how I met, or that's when I met the managing partner of my current firm, Romano Law. So Dominic Romano, at the time, his firm was building out a litigation practice. It was very small. They had just hired one very experienced, very well qualified litigation partner, and they had a perfect storm of 4 cases that they were in a motion to dismiss stage. There was multiple orders to show cause. It was just overwhelming for the firm. So they reached out, and I was with a contract agency, and they reached out to me, and they were basically like, "Can you start tomorrow on this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm happy to help. I need the extra income.
Right.
These people seem okay." But I was very hesitant to go back to a law firm because of my prior experiences with big law, not knowing that with solos, with smaller boutique firms, it's a little bit of a different vibe. And with Romano Law, I saw real quick that they were very professional. They were very, collegial, very like chill attorneys, and they were doing good work. And so my role with them sort of expanded over time. I was helping them with more and more lit matters. I went from contract attorney to now part-time attorney, to basically my role now as a litigation partner.
Right. Yeah. And I've known Dominic for a few years. I mean, I didn't know him back in the beginning of COVID and those time, but I know he runs an amazing firm. Everybody's professional, but it's not that big law stuffiness feel. I think it's a great mix. And I know he's just a great guy, and he's very forward thinking too with building the firm and different ideas. Him and I are both members of EO Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a fantastic group, and he runs the EO Lawyers Group, so which is great. So yeah, he does some big things. So I think a lot of this is, some of my takeaway: timing and resiliency for you. It's being able to be resilient enough and pivot, because I think pivoting is a sign of resiliency, especially if things change. When the world changes, what do you do? When life changes, what do you do? And maybe happiness changes, what do you do? Right? Because there's a lot of people that wake up in the law, especially in the law, where 20, 30 years into their career, they say, wait a minute, I've been miserable for the last 15 years of my life. Where did it go?
Right.
And that's one of the things that really leads to a lot of the negative aspects of the practice of law.
Absolutely.
So being able to have that resiliency and also obviously the timing to be able to pivot, move, change, and really being unafraid of that. So, those are some of my big takeaways from this. But now at least the story so far, so you get, you're there and you're now, the firm's growing, you're growing within the firm.
Mm-hmm.
How was it, how did you come to the decision to move to Florida? Because you weren't one of the people that fled COVID for Florida in 2020, right? You waited a little bit. I'm a native Floridian. We see all these people coming down. It was another wave. I mean, the reason I'm a native Floridian is because my parents moved down during one of the waves in the late 70s, early 80s down here. And so now, here you are, right? But why didn't you leave right away? And what happened in 2021 to say, all right, cool, I'm bringing the firm down to South Florida and I'm relocating my family?
So, as I got a little bit older and more mature, and
us men, it takes a little longer.
It definitely does take a little bit longer. I got married in 2017. And so, by the time 2020 rolled around, I was married. My firstborn was about 2 years old, and there was another one on the way. And so, it was always in the back of my head to leave New York at some point. And that was also just a process of growing up. Like when I came back from college to law school, I was in Manhattan, and then that became a little bit too hectic. So I moved to Brooklyn to try to get more space, and then to Queens. And then I found myself in a beach town in Long Island, just trying to get more space.
As long as it's not Jersey, right? Is that what they say?
Not Jersey, yeah. And not the true Long Island.
Okay. Yeah, my whole family is the true Long Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I, that little idea in the back of my head to leave New York really got accelerated with COVID. And between the lockdowns and everything and the weather, I just had enough. I didn't do it sooner because, I had to take the Florida bar. My
Okay.
wife was also an attorney, had to take the Florida bar. We wanted to kind of get, our ducks in a row before making this big move. And so I remember when I brought it up to my wife, she was like, okay, you want to go to Florida, take the bar first. If you pass, then I'll take it. We'll see what happens. Never really
Okay.
expecting that that it would actually happen.
So you didn't study together. You didn't take it together. You did first and she did second.
I proposed to her that we should study together. That
Right.
It was I think it was February of 2021. And she was like, we have a small child. I'm pregnant. Like, when is everything else going to get done while we're studying for the bar? And in my head, I was like, oh, well, I already took one, a while back. Like, how hard can it be? Turns out it's a lot.
Right.
I forgot like how much there is to memorize. But she was wise enough to convince me to kind of do it like one step at a time. And so I took it in February, and then she ended up taking it in June once I got the results.
Okay, good. So I'm assuming you passed, and then
I did.
right, and then she took it. Okay, good. So then it became a lot more real when you passed.
It became a lot more real when I passed. And so it became like a real thing that we had to talk about. And so she said, okay, like, let's do it. I'm fully in support, which was hard for her because, she's got a lot of family and friends in New York. And it was going to be difficult for her to leave that. But she recognized now with a family and stuff, we kind of wanted a better lifestyle, more space. And so she said, let's make the move. I'll find a job there. And I said, we can't do it that way because you love what you do. We met at the prosecutor's office. She works on child abuse cases and child homicides. It's what she's always wanted to do since college, right? Unlike me, where law school was kind of like this last minute decision.
Right.
She knew what she wanted to do. And so I said, let's look at Florida, look at state attorney's offices, just cold call them, just reach out and see if anyone would like to meet with you.
And at this point, was South Florida the option, or just somewhere in Florida? I mean, could you have been in Tampa? Could you have been in Orlando, Miami? What was the kind of that thought process?
So I was originally looking at the Tampa area because my parents had a house in Clearwater. They had since moved back up to New York after my niece and nephew were born. But so my first true experiences with living in Florida were on the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
And I was like, that's a great neighborhood. Like, let's look there. But, Broward County was very interested in meeting with her. And so that's where she ended up. And so after that, and that decision, happened pretty quick in this timeline. And so once she had that lined up, that's when I approached my managing partner and said, I'm looking to get licensed in Florida. I would love to keep working together. At the time, I was remote anyway. Or, if you want to cut ties, we'll cut ties. But, Dominic is very forward thinking.
Right.
He's like, well, this is great. Let's build
Right.
something out in South Florida. And so that's how that came about.
It was amazing, especially to have somebody like that, which who knows what would have happened if you proposed this in big law, right? Big law is
Right.
very slow to move, slow to react. I always say they're like that big aircraft carrier that is not nimble and can't
Right.
move and pivot. And when you have somebody like Dominic who's, oh, this is great, hey, a lot of business in South Florida,
Yeah.
new opportunities, Florida to New York and back, great sources of commerce and
Correct.
and referrals and people. So it just, to me, it seems like it was, I'm sure, I bet he probably said to himself, I wonder why I didn't think of that. Right. So,
Yeah.
Looking back, that's probably what he went through afterwards. It was like, oh, I should have thought of that. This is brilliant. So great.
Yeah.
So you guys move, you're down here now. What kind of cases are you handling, right now as, you're the litigation partner for South Florida?
Sure.
So how does that work, and how have you guys been building your practice?
So I came down here not really knowing anyone. I had I don't even really have relatives down here or friends. So it was a very interesting experience. And I had no professional network. But from day one, I joined the the bar associations. I looked at networking groups, and I made, a very concerted effort to start networking, building a professional network. Um, um, the firm is also very good at, marketing its services on the
Right.
internet. And so they started putting support behind that side of things. And so, we sort of had two fronts. Um, and then, in terms of cases, commercial litigation is a very broad practice area, right? So the way my law partner puts it is, if you own a business and there was a promise and it's broken and someone owes someone money, we can help.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because been doing this for a while. I kind of know what commercial litigation is, but for maybe
Sure.
the first 10 years of my career, I'm like, I don't know what that really is. That could be anything. Okay.
Yeah, typically it's some sort of breach of contract, breach of an agreement. A good chunk of my caseload is business partner disputes. So disputes between LLC members, which are very interesting cases. We handle those cases. A lot of business defamation cases, and then on top of that, some of the intellectual property litigation cases that I specialize in, like trademark infringement, things like that.
Okay. So some of the things that you had worked on previously
Right.
as well. And so you've been here now a few years. Was this the right move? Talk to us kind of about, how you're looking now, and what did you learn from not just all the different things throughout your career, but from such a big move to be in South Florida?
Yeah. First of all, 110%, this was the right move. I love it down here. There's many times where I wish I had made the move sooner, but I understand that the timing had to happen the way that it did. But I have two little boys now, and we have a pool and we have a yard, and the lifestyle is great. We have great neighbors. On top of that, professionally, through networking and different groups, I've met a lot of really good people down here, very welcoming people, right? Because you mentioned the whole COVID wave coming down here. I learned real quick that I should not advertise myself as a fresh New Yorker down here looking for a house, because I was not always welcome with open arms.
Right. Oh, you guys and your fancy big money coming down to drive up our prices.
And complaining about the pizza and the bagels and this and that.
Yes.
But it was a risk. I think it's a risk that paid off. To me, life is short. I didn't want to be complacent in New York. I didn't want to be one of those people that is just frustrated with their job and just doesn't do anything about it. Like I said, life is short. And so if you're uncomfortable, make a move. And I've been very lucky to have people in my life, my wife, my family, friends, that have supported some of these decisions which have been characterized as just crazy.
Well, and I think that's a great lesson here from your journey, is that, you said, if you're uncomfortable, make a move. But a lot of people, especially a lot of lawyers who have never failed in their life, they're afraid. There's a fear of failure, and there's just fear in general, because people who become lawyers tend to have been the people that have gotten straight A's their entire life, are always doing the right thing, working very hard. Their identity is a perfectionist. So what do you have to say to those people? From your experience, what advice can you give?
My advice would be, I think in my experience, that, lawyers, especially who are afraid to make a move, are worried about appearances, and won't take a certain action because they're afraid of what others might think. I think so much about being a good lawyer is being genuine. I'm sure you see this in trial work, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
A jury can see through, a facade in half a second. And it doesn't matter if you're obnoxious or a jerk or the nicest person, as long as you're genuine about it, you will
own it, be authentic.
Own it, be authentic, and you can advocate for your client authentically. And so I think that a lot of lawyers just get stuck, and like you said, you know, they're concerned with prestige and career. They're also trained to identify risk. So now all they see is the risk, and they're unable to kind of get past that.
Right. Which is interesting because the best lawyers are so creative to find solutions to problems, but a lot of them at the same time will tell you these are the 50 ways it's going to go wrong. And so one of our core values, our fifth and final core value here at the Rossen Law Firm, is get to yes. And
Sure.
it's because, look, it's about resiliency. It's about let's find the solution. Don't tell me no.
Right.
Lawyers are trained to tell you no. They're conservative in general.
Right.
Let's figure out a solution. Let's get to yes. There's always a way. And
Right.
so that's why we've always had that as one of our core values. And we're very lucky here to have our entire team, our lawyers, our staff, just everybody have that get to yes mindset. It wasn't always like that,
Right.
but now we're really good at that. And that's, I think, something special, not just in the law. It could be in any profession.
Oh, totally. I mean, I feel like that's the quickest way to lose a client, right? Just advise them of all the things that they shouldn't do, right? Offer a practical solution. That's something that we focus on. And so, yes, there's risks involved, and I'll try to gauge them as best as I can for you. But if this is your objective, I'm going to try to get you there.
Right? Be that strategic thinker, the strategic planner.
Correct.
We can deal with the risk, but let's come up with a strategy to get past it. Absolutely. So, Andres, I think this has been absolutely fantastic hearing about you, your journey, some major nuggets in here for people. Anybody who's listening, we have a wide range of people listening to this, not just attorneys. And so, Andres, what's the best way to get in touch with you if anybody here is like, wow, it seems like a really cool guy, or I'd love to talk to him and grab coffee or just, chat? How can people, either just get in touch with you, whether it's for you personally or even your services as an attorney through Romano Law?
Easiest way is probably look up my bio on the firm website. It's romanolaw.com. My name is Andres Muñoz. Reach out. It's very easy to schedule a consultation with me if you want to chat. I'm also on social media. Instagram is one of my favorites. Andres Muñoz Esquire.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, Andres. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And again, I think you gave us some tremendous knowledge that we really do appreciate.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here. And thanks for listening to this long, winding story.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one. All right. Thanks a lot.
Of course.